So welcome today to my last webinar for Udacity, actually, on informational interviews, how to plant your seeds. And I'll get to what I mean by plant your seeds later, because I'm a big advocate in being somewhat intentional in your networking and in your informational interviews, in the sense of thinking about this as a dynamic way for you to start creating relationships, potentially in the places that you want to work. Okay, give me a second. So I will look at I'll come back to the chat in a moment, but just so you know a little bit about me, my name is Andrea. I live in Portland, Oregon. I have been a coach now starting, I think, in 2014 or so. And before that, had a long history in Hollywood, actually, producing films and working with people, mainly writers and directors, helping them see through their visions. I'm continuing this work, I believe, as a coach, actually, in the sense that I think one of the things I'm best at is being able to help people share their stories and share their stories in a way that puts their best foot forward. Okay. Today we're going to talk about informational interviews. Like what are they, basically? Why should we do them? It's something that has become definitely more popular worldwide right now, not just because it's a great way to gather information and to start to build your network, but also because this last year, we're not having nice little networking events that we can go to meet people. It's much more difficult to do anything that's not through this type of medium right now and for the foreseeable future, basically. So as a world, in some ways, we have been propelled forward maybe 10 years in this past year, as far as how we work, you know, and not just the methodology of our work, but you know what work looks like, and what networking looks like as well. And so part of what I wanted to address with this informational interview is also that this is absolutely possible to do this type of networking now, and people are more accommodating and open to it than they ever have been before, because there aren't other opportunities so easily to make an appointment and come into somebody's office, let's say, or to go to a networking event and happen across somebody that might be helpful to you in your career. So we are going to talk about why do it, elements of an informational interview, and I'm going to talk to you about like what should be in the outreach letter that you share, and we're also going to talk about how you can pitch yourself really briefly in that letter. And so we'll share that with each other. Hopefully if we have enough people, that'll be interesting. And then we'll do some follow-up and questions and stuff. So first of all, let me actually, before I ask you to to answer this, I want to know what, I want to tell you what an informational interview is, okay? An informational interview is you are the interviewer, okay? Meaning that you are interviewing somebody else to discover things, things about their job, things about the workplace, things about the career that they have pursued. It is an opportunity for you to ask questions and to learn. And as such, you're actually doing the interview yourself as well. They are not interviewing you. So it is not a job opportunity. I think you're probably seeing a smaller part of the screen now, but I have to redo this a little bit. It is not a, it is not a opportunity for them to interview you, and it is not a job interview. So it is different that way. So what do you think, and you can just add this in the chat, that's why I was just changing my view right now. What do you think are the the most important thing about doing an informational interview? What do you think you could get out of it by talking to somebody that you have not met before, and who is in an area that might be of interest to you? If you could just write down things in the chat, that would be great, because I'd like to see what people are thinking. I've also asked in the chat if you could introduce yourself. So saying where you're from and what it is you're studying. Sam, thank you for sharing that. Everybody else, that would be great if you shared it as well. Chloe did earlier, and she's from Glasgow and is doing data and has her PhD in physics, right? Learning from their experience. Yep. That's a good one. You can speak up as well, or put it in the chat. What other things might you get out of a informational interview? What you imagine you might get? Guidance. Yeah. Anybody else? Thank you for chiming up, Saber. So you are doing deep learning. Awesome. Chart out a possible career path as an example. Yes, I think that's a good idea. Hi, Hitesh. Nice to see you again. And UX designing. So the question that we're all answering right now basically is, what do you think is the number one reason to do an informational interview for you? I think all of those reasons are good, and I encourage you to engage, because I think we learn from each other. I think actually the number one reason why I would do an informational interview is something that may be a little more intangible, but is ultimately what matters, which is developing relationship, expanding the relationships that I have in a field that I believe I want to be in, and deepening those relationships as well, learning about the other person and deepening those relationships. So I'll talk about this later, but I think that oftentimes the mindset that we need to have is definitely one of curiosity. Okay, so talking about other benefits of an informational interview. Getting firsthand relevant information from people who are professionals in the area that you're in. Can somebody let me know, are you seeing this properly? I hope so. I'll put it back on present for right now, actually. So I think that'll be fine. Getting firsthand relevant information about the realities of the workplace. Finding out about career paths, as you said, that you may not see, like by looking at people's LinkedIn profiles, you get some sense of their career path, absolutely. But you may not know some of the variety of how things happen. So for example, when I was, we were in a conversation today that I thought about it in a different way now, which is I often tell people, like, it is easier for you, if you want to change your job, to look in the company that you're in already and figure out how you can move departments, for example, in that area. Doing an informational interview, for example, with people in the department that you want to go to, learning what kind of skills they're looking for, where any gaps might be, whether you are a good match for that or not, as far as what skill level you're at now. Do you need to go any further or not? And what is relevant about doing that sort of internal informational interview is that it often makes it easier for you to start to take a different career path. That is hard to read oftentimes in people's profiles. And it's something that it's good to hear, if they're sharing those sorts of ideas with you, that they started in one area and they moved to another area. And how did that happen for them? In reading a profile, you don't necessarily understand the details of how somebody moves or how they develop their career path. And so this is, by having this sort of conversation with somebody, you can get into some of the nuance of how they're moving in their career, how they're moving up or over in their career, and how that's worked for them. Insider knowledge, obviously, that can be good to understand, as I said, skills that are really valued at the company or might be even lacking at the company. What it's like to work there. You know, this is an opportunity very much for you to listen also. So I think that, you know, in choosing how to do informational interviews, that one of the first things that you should think about doing is creating what I call a hit list, basically. A hit list of the types of companies that you think you would like to work for. And trying to develop relationships through informational interviews at those companies. So this is what I mean by laying seeds. So if we look at the universe as, I think there are 40 companies out there that I think I might be a good match for. It might be interesting to me. It might be that they're a caring company, that they care about humans. I've done my research. This is the world that I think I want to join, okay? Notice that all of this is not, these are jobs that are offered right now, and these are the jobs that I'm going for. The way I look at it is that's a very passive way of looking for work, okay? That's a very reactive way to do it. This, in a way, is a more calculated and more proactive way of doing it, in the sense that, okay, I'm defining the universe. The universe are these 40 places that I think I could be a match for from the research I've done. And now let me start laying relationships in each one of these places. Maybe I already have a relationship there. That's great. But maybe I don't have a relationship yet. And if I don't have a relationship yet at that place, let me see who it is I have the most in common with. Who can I reach out to see if they're willing to do an informational interview with me? Ultimately, to see, do I want to keep this company on the list or not? Maybe I will replace it. Maybe what I hear between the lines when I'm doing this interview and hearing from this person is, wow, they're unhappy here, and the company isn't very nice. And it's nice that they're doing this interview with me, and I've learned something about their career and all this, but oh my gosh, that company is now off the list. This is not the place I want to go. So you're not, you're interviewing them about themselves, you're interviewing them about the company, but you know, part of it is that you're also sort of doing reconnaissance. You know, is this a place I might want to go and I want to continue to pursue in some fashion or not? I'm saying that this is a good way to organize yourself because it's a lot of effort to do an informational, to get one set up. And so I'd rather you spend the effort with the educated guess in mind that this might be ultimately a place for you to go, rather than happenstance, guesswork. Oh, I like that person's profile. Okay, I don't know where they work. I don't think I would ever want to work there, but let me develop a relationship with this person. That can also work. I'm just saying, I think it's good to be a little more calculated about it, a little more hopeful that the reason you're choosing this person is that where they are, or the type of position they're in also, is something that you aspire to. Okay, so in setting up an interview, the first thing to do is research. We want to pick the people. So first of all, I already said, I think that you should choose people by calculating places that you think, or institutions or companies that you think you might be a good match for. So that's part of the research. The next part of the research is looking into the people that are working at that company, let's say, and identifying the people that you have the most in common with. It could be that you both like cake baking or soccer, or that you've both taken Udacity classes, or you both went to the same university, or that you that they've written a paper that you read and that you thought, hey, this is a clever person. I actually would like to know more about them. They're interested in some of the same ideas that I'm interested in. And I can tell that way because of things that they have published over time. Maybe you're part of the same group of people. You're both in a data analyst group, maybe, or like the Bertelsmann Scholarship Group, or something that you have in common. What we find in reaching out to people with informational interviews, the more that you make that clear to begin with, the more that you say, hey, you know Joe, I know Joe, let's talk, basically. Whatever the Joe is, that there's some similarity there, the more likely they are to respond. And I'm going to go into other elements, not just yet, but other elements that need to be there as well. But identifying the people that you want to do. Preparing for the interview, that has to do with establishing what type of questions you would like to ask. And also being able to present yourself in, a sentence or two, okay? Because this interview is not about you. You do need to be able to, introduce yourself, speak about yourself at the beginning of the interview, but it really is about letting them take over, basically, asking open-ended questions so that they can talk about themselves, they can talk about business, they can talk about things, and for you to learn. When I say initiate contact, LinkedIn, yes, that's an excellent way to go about it. The other possibility is sending emails to their work email. That is not as preferable, I would say, just because we don't want to, one, it can be lost pretty easily. Two, it's a little more of an attack than you want it to be. LinkedIn is set up as a networking platform, basically. So if they are engaged in LinkedIn at all, part of them wants to be networking, at least part of them wants to be networking. But their work email address is a little like walking into their home. And so if you cannot find another way to get a hold of this person and you think, oh my gosh, but they're exactly who I would like to learn from, then I would go to their work email address if you can't do LinkedIn, but I would prefer choosing LinkedIn. You conduct the interview, and then a very important part of it is follow-up. And this is true when you think about networking in general also, not just informational interviews. And what I mean by that is if you are going to a networking event, I think it's always important to set certain goals as to what it is you want out of it, how many people do you want to meet, what kind of people do you want to meet, and decide even in advance, how am I going to follow up with all of these people? Am I going to set up coffees with them? Am I going to listen carefully to what it is we talked about in the informational, for example, and maybe share articles that are relevant to them and that they might find interesting, or maybe something strange came out of this interview and you all discovered that you both love curling, and that's like, you both happen to love this sort of thing. Follow up with this, share some information about the curling. This is about relationship, remember, to begin with. And the way that you deepen relationships is you invest. You invest in the other person, basically. You invest in the things that you have in common. You figure out how to follow up, not around need, but around giving potentially, and around continuing to establish the things that you might have in common. Okay. So I want to try this with you all. And I need to, I guess, do this in a different way so that I can see the chat. Give me 1 second. There. Okay. And you can't see the slides. And I didn't know that you can see the slides. Okay. Sorry. Because I couldn't see the chat myself. Oh, technology is wonderful. You can hear me though, okay, everybody, right? Give me 1 second, and I'll share the slides again. I don't know why it went away. I'm not sure why it is not sharing right now. I can see you all now. And give me one moment and let's see if that shares the screen. Can you all see that now?
Yes, I can.
You can, okay. Sorry that went away. This is the slide that you missed. I actually walked through many of the aspects of the slide. So you can see that at this point. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of tech challenges, but I want to go on to this one actually. That was the last slide, if you missed that. These were the steps that we want to keep in mind: research, identifying people, preparing for the interview, initiating contact, and conducting the interview and doing the follow-up. So one thing I would like to try to do for each other is in the chat, I would like to see how you would introduce yourself to someone. And so we're talking about a sentence maybe. You don't need to sell yourself hard to this person. You just need to sell something about yourself, basically. We should assume that they have your information on LinkedIn, so they know where you're from, they know a little bit about you, but in a sense, you want to give a summary. And that's why I thought it would be fun if you all introduce yourselves to each other in this way. A one-sentence summary of who you are and where you're going, basically, and what you're imagining that you're going to be doing. So it may be that you're turning into a UX designer, or you come from a background in something else and designing, but you're really passionate about UX design, and that's what you would like to share about yourself. But if you can do that in the chat, and I'm just wondering if people are seeing the chat, since I am not seeing the chat quite yet, that would be fabulous. So unmute yourself and let me know if you are seeing yourself in the chat or not. And we don't have to do it in the chat. This is something that you could actually do in, we can speak out loud as well. Now I can see the chat. Okay, that's better. And thank you, Sam, for letting me know that there was a problem there. I'm going to put a little example in the chat right now of how I might, in a very brief sentence, introduce myself. Again, with the assumption that they have my LinkedIn profile, they can see it basically, but I want to give them just a little bit of something about myself. Does anybody want to share in the chat? Okay, since I'm not seeing anybody share, we will move on. And I'm going to give you some examples of questions that you might think of asking, okay? Some of these are very general questions in the sense of, how did you begin your career? What got you into it? What got you excited about being in your career to begin with? These are good open-ended questions, okay? You're not looking for questions that you can give a yes or no answer to, basically. You want them to be able to talk about themselves. People love talking about themselves, first of all. So the main thing is you're trying to get them to talk about themselves. and trying to get them to share things. And look for the recommendation. So let's say that you're just beginning in a UX career, and that's the area that you're going in. What did they think was most important to them in having a UX career? What sort of preparation was most important to them? What was most relevant to them? How did they get their job? How did that come about? That might teach you something a little bit about the industry. I just want to give you a weird example of that, so you have some sense. Basically, there was this guy that I worked with who his interest was in robotics and agriculture, and how robots were used in agriculture. And he found through doing informational interviews and finding out, from people that were working in that field, like how did they network, where did they meet, how did they get their job, how did they network to it in some fashion or another. And what he discovered anyway was that there was this Slack channel out there. And the Slack channel was specifically for farmers who were interested in technology and how technology could better run their farms. And that this guy that he was interviewing introduced him to the Slack channel. And now that's become one of his biggest areas that he does networking in, because only because he discovered that way. So those are some of the sort of questions that I would ask also if you're entering into a new career, is where do they network themselves? What are the networking groups they're a part of that maybe you should be joining and be a part of as well? Here are some of these other questions that are interesting. What skills, abilities, and personal attributes are essential to success in your job in this field? So having them do a little reflection for you and listening for skills that you have and that you don't have, or that you want to be working on that might be relevant. One of the questions I also want to have, I should check again if you're seeing this, since I don't know for sure, and I keep having this. I'm screen sharing, it says. Okay, so I want to know, for example, who might you suggest that I speak to next? I'm gathering information now. I'm trying to figure out where I want to go next, and next best steps for me, right? Who would you suggest that I speak to? Would you mind if I used your name if I reach out to that person? Those are all things that you can absolutely ask at the end of the meeting. So you're not asking for a job ever at the end of an informational interview, but you could ask for the next steps. So follow up. First thing to do, keep records of what it is. Great. Thank you very much for Christina for sharing that. Keep records of what their answers were, okay? Or things that you realize, oh my gosh, that wasn't a question that I didn't quite get the answer to that question that I have, or I'd like to know more about that. So, right away, and this is a good thing to do, by the way, in interviews also, when you're interviewing for a job, great right afterwards to write down, what were the questions that they asked me? How did I answer them? How might I do it better the next time? Before you forget, because you'll forget fast. But just like with that one, write down what were your big takeaways here from this conversation? What did you learn? What other questions did it open up that you didn't even realize you had? And that maybe you want to follow up on with this person, or maybe this will better inform you for the next one. Definitely send a thank you note. This was a gift someone has given you, and you asked for it, but it's still a gift. And you should be thankful for that. Depending on how strong the connection was, you might want to give a little gift. My cousin, who's 25 years old and works at a big advertising agency, and is looking for different work to do. And she did an informational interview at a company with a man that she met at a resort sort of thing or something like that when they went away last year. and did an informational interview with him and sent him a little Starbucks card afterwards as a thank you, because he spent a good amount of time. They wound up speaking for an hour on the phone. He wound up introducing her to someone else in the company that would be more appropriate for her to talk to about possibly getting hired and getting more information. He was really generous and really invested, basically, in this conversation. And so her follow-up, followed suit. It wasn't just a thank you very much. It was a thank you. Thank you. That was really nice for you to invest in me like that. And here's a little something for you too. So this is not about a big gift at all, okay? I'm just saying that if you feel like the conversation warrants it and it was a very generous giving that they gave you, think about what you'd like to give back, okay? Again, remember this is about relationship and it can make a big impression, okay? When you do something like that and you appreciate people appropriately. Another part of this, keep in touch with the person and keep developing this relationship. Share things when it's not about necessarily what you need right now or that you're looking for work or anything like that, or that there's now a job, just that there's a job open at their place and would you put them up for it? Would they put you up for it, excuse me. But keep in touch with the person, find ways to share things that you discovered you have in common, or maybe ask for their input on something. Don't let the relationship die when you hang up on the phone, okay? Do a follow-up. Okay, hold on one sec. Let's move forward. Okay, it didn't move forward. Okay. So what you should be prepared for in this interview. First of all, prepare the questions in advance, of course. And have them be flexible. Have more questions than you do think you have time for. But you want to be able to have this be a focused conversation, basically, and a limited time. So, and respect the person's time. If you have asked for 20 minutes of your time, stay within that. And if it feels like they would like to continue speaking and this conversation is going very nicely, regardless, at the 20-minute mark, now I'm sharing again, of course, okay, there. Regardless, at the 20-minute mark, be like, I would love to continue this conversation, but I respect your time. And I said that it was 20 minutes and I thank you so much for meeting now. Maybe we should wrap it up now if you don't have any other time, okay? Give them a choice at that point. Don't just assume, oh, they were going, let me do this. It shows that you respect their time if you honor the fact that this is what you asked for. You asked for 20 minutes, they agreed to 20 minutes. And if anything goes beyond that, you're re-upping the agreement. That now it can proceed beyond that. And it's good to get agreement on that sort of thing, as opposed to just letting it go. And remember, again, you're basically in charge of the interview, okay? Things you also want to add is, you want to ask if there's other people that you should meet and that, what they suggest that way. Your resume, yes, of course you should have that ready. And you should have it ready to email them right away. I know people who've done informationals where the person has been like, yeah, show me your resume right away. They show the resume and it's like, and then they had all sorts of comments on what should be done with the resume to make it better for the type of work that they were doing. So do have that ready. You don't know when you might run into someone who's going to take a deep interest in you and want to move you forward in some fashion and be your advocate. And you want to be able to give them all tools at that point and be ready for it. I wrote down prepare relevant stories. I think you should just be like an interview for a job. Always have ready stories that you want to share about yourself that are clear stories that have a beginning, or that you can talk about the situation, you can talk about the sort of actions that you took, and you can talk about the results you got. That's a story, okay? A story has a beginning, middle, and end to it. And you all have stories, and you all have things that might be worthwhile sharing and that are indicative of who you are. This is an opportunity potentially to share maybe one of those stories if they ask you about yourself in more detail, okay? Be prepared to deliver a story if that's the case, not, oh, I don't know, there's nothing about me. You don't need to know anything about me. This is not an answer, okay? You want to be able to share a little bit about yourself. So, things to get ready and to think about: the questions, have your resume ready just in case, your introduction, and also a story that you want to share, if it comes up that you can share about yourself, that you feel comfortable, that is indicative of you in some fashion. The other thing is just, do this in a formal environment, in the sense of don't do it lying down on your couch and, with your feet up and talking that way, or at a Starbucks with all the noise and so on. Do it in a way that it's quiet, focused, and you're giving them your full attention. And there's a bit of respect going on in that fashion as well. So let's see if I can get the chat back again. Give me 1 second here. Okay. Any questions at all about this? And one thing I'm curious about, people, and you can please unmute yourself and you can talk, that's fine. Have any of you actually done informational interviews before? I would love to know that, and have you all share with each other what type of experiences you might have had with informational interviews. Arvina?
Hi, Andrea.
Hi.
Thank you so much for the presentation. That was very insightful.
Good. I'm glad. I'm sorry if it was coming in and out, but I'm glad that it was.
No worries. Thank you. So the reason why I joined to this webinar is because last year I did informational interviews, and that was like my first experience.
Yeah.
And I think I conducted about 100 interviews
Wow.
over the summer.
Wow. Listen to you. Good for you.
That was pretty intense, and it took a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of preparation, but a lot of learning during that time. I made a lot of mistakes, and then I learned through those mistakes. And I agree with all the points that you have mentioned. I guess my question is one. Usually a challenge. I don't want to say it's an issue or problem, but challenge I usually face. Is usually following up and keeping in touch with my networks and deepening those relationships afterwards. I feel a little bit intimidated, like to send articles or to send resources. I feel like I'm burdening them with, extra information. It would be very helpful if you can, narrate on that.
I have a question for you, Parvina. If a friend of yours sends you an article that they think would be interesting to you, do you consider that a burden?
No, usually I like that the person took the time and thought about me and thought that I would be interested in that article.
Parvina,
yes,
you're not special. In the sense that that's going to be their reaction too. They're not going to be, oh my gosh, Parvina, how dare her take another minute of my time by forcing me to open this article all about curling, even though I love curling. How dare she send this to me? That's not going to be anybody's response. So one thing, I would just say, Parvina, and listen, I would love for you to share more of your experience of doing the 100 interviews. But as far as the follow-up goes, and as far as deepening relationship goes, we're human beings. however different we may be, there's also a lot that is very, very similar. If your reaction to somebody reaching out to you and saying, hey, I haven't talked to you in a month, but I just saw this thing, I thought about you, I thought you might enjoy this. Boy, for me at least, I would have a really positive impression of you. And that would deepen our relationships, and that would make me think, Parvina, yeah, I want to keep her on my radar, right? My reaction would not be, I don't, how dare she remember this about me, that I like curling and, and infiltrate my day like this. So, some of this is, I don't want to say it's common sense, because it's not necessarily. I think that it is, I think that creating and maintaining relationships can be challenging, and they take effort to do. One thing that I didn't mention in this, and I want to, and I did want to talk about, is mindset-wise, not just for informational interviews, but for other networking situations as well. Something to keep in mind is not the mindset of I need, I want, I have to get this out of this person, this piece of knowledge or this connection, or that's all a very basically greedy way of approaching a new relationship. The two mindsets that I think are helpful in being able to conduct an informational interview and approach new relationship in this way is, one, curiosity, and two, service. How might I help this person? What might I share with this person that might be interesting for them? How can I be of service? It may not be around the area of specialty that you're talking about. It may be that you're from Glasgow and they're from Edinburgh, and they want to know what the coolest place to live in Glasgow is, right? That it may be totally unrelated, but something that you can share with them because you have that sort of thing in common. So Parvina, first of all, don't worry that you're somehow hurting somebody by sharing information. You're not, and you're not, they can always ignore it if they want to, right? And just say, yeah, I don't care about curling anymore. I don't really care that she sent this to me. They're not going to have a negative impression of you that you thought of them. It's rare enough that we think of other people. Any other questions?
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea, for your answer. That makes a lot of sense.
Certainly. And Parvina, by the way, any other insights that you had in doing 100 of these interviews?
I guess all my interviews that I was able to get was through my networks. So that's how important networking is. And if you haven't, for all the participants who are in this webinar, I would like to say that if you haven't been networking, please do it, because this is the way how you can maybe find your future boss or potential boss. Of course, like why I was doing informational interview was I was looking for a job, and so that was my main reason. But then when you start informational interviews, you should kind of forget about it and be less selfish and be like very curious about the other person and try to learn from them, and please don't ask them for a job in your first interview. This is the biggest mistake. So I guess that's overall, that's what I learned from informational interviews.
Fabulous. Are you working now?
Currently, I'm pivoting to data analyst role. So no, I'm not working right now. I'm taking classes with Udacity and really focusing on, starting a new career in a new field. And I guess I have one question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering, I'm right now, I'm on my second month of of my courses, and I was wondering, should I be doing informational interviews, networking right now, or
Why
is it
not?
better, to do it after finishing my
No,
courses?
I don't think there's, and it's actually one of the things that I really recommend for people that are in school, for example, in college or in graduate school, is in essence, by the time you graduate, all of those informational interviews should be over already. Because by the time you graduate, that's when you're actually looking for work. And now that's when you want to actually call on your networking, people to help place you. So you want to lay all of those seeds in advance. So I would say, absolutely, there's no reason for you to wait for that. This is part of you stepping into a new career, doing a pivot, and learning more about data science. And that may inform how you're actually learning things as well, and what you focus on, or what you realize, in this class, it doesn't really cover visualizations, well enough. And visualizations seem to be a really important thing for the type of data work that I would like to do. How can I better improve my skills in that area? Or what sort of things should I publish in that area? And you might not know that, I'm making up what that is, but you might not know that without doing an informational interview and seeing, oh my gosh, they put so much value on these visualizations being wonderful stories. I need to work on those skills. So I wouldn't wait.
Yeah, thank you, Andrea. Thank you.
Any other questions from anybody about informational, or any worries about doing it as well? I wanted to say, I just wanted to share one other story, which is a woman I know who was living in Japan for years and who was moving back to the United States. And all she knew was, so she had been teaching English in Japan. All she knew was she wanted to work in environmental stuff in the United States. So she did exactly what Parvina did. She had like 100 of these informational interviews all over the place, trying to figure out what area it was she really wanted to go into, and making connections, et cetera. When I met her, she told me this story. She's like, I'm working now with one of these people I did this informational interview with, and I'm in charge of all of the greenways in Portland, of where people use their bicycles and stuff. So absolutely related to that area. And she had reached out to somebody in that department who is now her boss. But this happened like soon afterwards, basically, not out of the conversation initially. But absolutely, this is a way to open up career paths for yourself as well. That's it of my story. Chloe, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, so basically, I'd never actually heard of informational interviews before this seminar. And I was wondering, how would you land an informational interview?
Well, so what you want to do is you want to write a letter. This is not a phone call. You want to write a letter, preferably on LinkedIn, where you're reaching out and you're saying, hi, Joe, this is what I noticed your profile. You're working at a great company that I have interest in. I've noticed also that we've both taken Udacity classes together, similar Udacity classes, and I'm making this transition to X. I'm turning from being a physicist to being a data scientist. I would love to have 20 minutes of your time, perhaps over Zoom or Google Meet or one of these formats, basically, over the next couple of weeks. The one thing I would add to this letter also, which is just me, but I think it's a good, effective thing, and Parvina, you can chime in also, is I like to say also at the end of it, and I will follow up with you in a week, let's say, or in 2 weeks. The reason why I say it's good to say I'm going to follow up are 3 reasons. 1, guilt. Basically, you see this, uh-oh, Chloe's coming back to me again. Maybe I should respond to her before she comes back to me. Provides a little bit of guilt potentially. 2, when you do follow up, and you write Joe again and say, hey, Joe, just touching base again, would love to know if you have 20 minutes, to meet with me regarding your career and X company. Thanks, Chloe. Okay. Then when you followed up, you are being clear that you are professional. You're a person of your word. You said, I'm going to follow up. I followed up, right? Then if they don't respond after that, and yes, people will not respond. People do not read their email. People do not look on LinkedIn. People's mothers dies. God knows what happens with people, okay? But not everybody responds. It has nothing to do with you. Not everybody responds. If at that point you followed up, you said you were going to follow up, you followed up, you don't hear anything from them, now you know, okay, I'm done with Joe, and I'm now moving on to Susie. And Susie works in this place. We don't have as much in common, but I'm going to write her and talk to her about what we do have in common and do exactly the same thing again. Mm-hmm. So in a way, mentally, it gives you a break. You understand, Joe, I wrote Joe, I followed up with Joe, Joe didn't respond, done with Joe, next person. So it gives you that sort of break in mind. Is that clear, Chloe?
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any other questions?
How would you suggest us to keep in touch with the network that, let's say we had an informational interview, and how to not forget about each other?
Yeah, so to keep it, I think there's two questions in there, okay? And one of the questions is, it's sort of like sales. How do I keep myself organized so that 5 months don't go by and I go, oh my gosh, I was supposed to talk to Chloe and I forgot about Chloe. What you can do is, let's say like with what Parvina did, she reached out to 100 people. Maybe 25 of those people are people that she actually wants to keep in her life. And they are people that she considers of value, that she feels like they had a good connection, feels like, I want to continue this. I want to see where this goes. Those 25, let's say, because not everybody do you want to deepen your relationship with, okay? But that's for you to judge, okay? But for the ones that you do, I would put those 25, I would decide when I want to follow up, put it in a calendar, and on a sort of consistent basis, do follow-ups. So if you want to do it a month from then for the first one, and then 3 months, just put it in a calendar and trigger yourself to remember, hey, something, I haven't talked to Chloe in a while, and I saw something recently that I thought she would like, let me share that now. And if you hadn't thought about Chloe, then in your calendar, that it reminds you, hey, follow-up time, Chloe, then you can think about it also. Reach out and maybe just see how she's doing. Or say, hey, I noticed the new news from your company that you all are trying this new venture. Congratulations on that. That's wonderful. Whatever it might be. It doesn't have to be necessarily you giving of, like, I have to figure out the perfect article to send to Chloe before I reach out to her. It could be just sort of checking in and seeing what's going on and touching base with the person, basically. Does that help, Tigran?
Yep, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Some of this is listen, networking to some degree is sales. What you're selling is yourself. And in selling yourself, you want to remember to keep yourself in front of people and present in some fashion. And mainly what I'm doing is I'm saying, yeah, if you think about selling yourself, it's actually kind of uncomfortable. But if you think about giving to people and keeping that as part of what you're selling, that can be a much more comfortable place to be. Okay, so if there are no other questions, one thing before we go, I'd like you to just look at is in the chat, several people have been generous to share their LinkedIn profiles and would like to connect with you. for you all to connect with each other. And I just want to show you one thing that's easy to do, so you should know. If you click the 3 buttons on the right side across from everyone in the chat, you see the thing that says Save Chat. If you click that, the chat will download into your computer so that you can then go to these LinkedIn profiles easily and connect with each other in some way. If anybody has not shared their LinkedIn but would like to start connecting with the people that are in this room, please do so now before I close the room. And that's a way to grab everything easily, basically, is the Save Chat. Thank you very much for joining me today. I'm sorry there was a little bit of technical problems as we went along, but I hope that you will start to incorporate informational interviews into the way that you network and into the way that you start finding opportunities and knowledge as you're on this path to becoming professionals in whichever field you are in.
Thank you very much. It was very insightful.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. And I just got your email about sharing it to GH2Gen. I will save the chat as well, and I'll send that on to you a little later.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Have a nice day.
Certainly. Take care.
Thank you, Andrea.
Bye.
Thank you. That was a good one.
Great. Take care. Have fun.
Thank you, Andrea.
You're welcome. Okay, I'm going to close it out now. Take care.